Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are new here and you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, you can head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, we answer your questions on media and tech productions. And on our second hour is typically something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be speaking about social media, decoding it. Which platforms work for our community, which ones will help with productivity and creativity. So you want to stay tuned for our second hour. So producers, go ahead and submit your questions now so that this show is driven by you and that we can answer them accordingly. And you know what? Speaking of questions, let's get into it. Alexander?
First question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Harrison has introduced immersive mixing and Mixbus 10. In a crowded DAW market, where do you think Mixbus has an advantage? And there's a link there to the announcement.
Alex?
Mixbus is a software-based mixer, and we've had them actually on. We had them on a couple of years ago to talk about the product. It's pretty impressive. It basically puts an entire mixing board, on your computer. And where it really got a lot more notoriety was during the pandemic. So it was something that you could run in the cloud. So it's cross-platform, so Mac or PC, and maybe Linux. I'm not sure, but it could run in the cloud. So a lot of people have used Mixbus in the past. One of the things that we kept asking for was immersive support because we're interested in doing 5.1 and other things like that. And they've now incorporated that. So there's some 3D panning, so that it's in a more traditional, like you're looking for something that feels like a traditional mixer that's in the cloud. I think that it is, and if you've already been using Harrison consoles, there's a lot of advantages there. One of the ones that we looked at that I'm really interested in as well is the on-hertz.io or com, which is more of a nodal-based mixer, which we're going to be taking a look at in more detail as we go into this rest of the year.
Alexander?
Yeah, it looks like a great product. I have yet to try it, but as somebody who's really into analog modeling, and I try so many different plugins. I mean, I've tried so many different SSL recreations over the years, SSL, E and G flavors of consoles from the 4000 series, for example. So it's very interesting the way it's laid out, too. I mean, very much models an analog workflow. So I'm excited. And it looks like the immersive features are only in the Pro version at $500 US dollars, I'm assuming. But for $500, I mean, to get a very powerful DAW with immersive mixing, with the choice to be able to not only use that SSL EQ, but they actually have a feature where you can actually go back and forth and you can A/B between the Harrison proprietary EQ channel strip and the SSL, which I think is really cool. So I'm going to have to give it a try.
Next question.
Next one's from Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. My PavoTube 2 6C from Nanlite died. With the optional Nanlite PavoTube 2 6C battery grip, which utilizes NPF batteries, bring it back to life.
Jason?
Well, it depends on what's wrong with it. The Nanlite gets a little bit weird in the way that you plug in the power at the bottom. So, yeah, I mean, if that is the problem, then sure. But I find they're pretty tough, so I'm kind of surprised that you managed to kill it.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat of, I think that it is a little tricky, and it's partially the plug, but it's very sensitive. And I don't know if you've done this. You may have already done this, Paul, but it will not handle a USB-C to USB-C connection. So if you're trying to charge it with a USB-C to USB-C, you have to go to USB-A, the old one that's going to be limited to 5 volts, and plug it in. If you plug it into a higher powered solution, it will immediately not charge. So what you think may be not charging, you may have changed your cable and thought that maybe you could charge it a little faster with USB-C. It won't work. So what you need to do is go find a USB-A to USB-C, find an old, an older charger and plug it in and make sure. Because I thought that mine had died, and it was just because I was trying to accelerate. I was trying to use it with everything else that I used, and it didn't work well. So I would check that first. The lights themselves are not that expensive. I don't know if I would go through the trouble of trying to adapt them. If it really has died, and what I just told you doesn't work, I'd probably just buy another one. I mean, and I don't know why it would die. If it died within the warranty, call them. If it died outside of the warranty, then just get another one. They're pretty great lights. I use them for my mobile kit.
And yeah, Paul, if you can let us know, Mickey as asked in the comments, what exactly do you mean by the fixture died? So that would also probably help us to give you some more direction on that as well. Next question.
Next question comes from John Nichols in Concord. What are the strategies you use to manage dust on cables and equipment in your home, office, and studio?
Alex?
I mean, I have a couple of little vacuum cleaners so that you can get these little electronic. I don't think I have one within reach, but I have a couple of these, and they've got a couple different settings, and they're usually USB powered. Get the USB-C powered ones. Don't get ones that power some other way. You just plug them into anything else that you have, and then I just kind of run them over things pretty often to keep things relatively clear. The hardest part is like switchers, like my ATEM switcher, trying to get into between all those things. And a lot of times I'm using, something that's going to dab into those. A lot of times I've used, Q-tips and so on and so forth to kind of slide through those to try to get to some of those things. What I don't use is the gel. There's a gel that is that you see a lot of ads for that you can just put it on top of things, pull everything up. That's good for your car. It's not really good for your electronics. It does leave some residue. Not that I haven't tried, but I wouldn't do that again. So that's the thing to kind of take into account. But otherwise, other than just occasional cleaning, I don't do a lot to manage my dust.
Next question.
Next question comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. What percentage of the screen do you keep clear for captions along the bottom of the screen? For a 1920 by 1080 screen, which line to which line? Thanks.
Alex?
If you count them from the bottom, typically the captions, there's usually 8, if I remember correctly, there are 8 segments vertically that are on the screen, so that 1080 is divided by about 8. And then the lines that we usually keep clear are lines 2 and 3 from the bottom. So those are the two that the very bottom one is not useful, but lines 2 and 3 from the bottom out of that 8 are the ones that we usually make available to the captions.
Next question.
Next one's from Tyler Darlington in San Diego, California, and this is a QR code question. I'm looking at buying an Ultra Studio monitor mini or 4K with the intention of viewing HDR while color grading. Was there a better and new option presented at NAB this year? Alex?
I didn't see any. I didn't see any new ones. Anything new that I was looking for. I mean, I think that HDR. We use the Ultra Studio 4K Mini. I think is the Ultra Studio 4K Mini. I don't know if it's the same as your monitor Mini is a really small one. We use one that's a little bit bigger than that. Anyway, so we found that those are the ones that we found the most effective. I have to admit I wasn't really looking for those types of things. So we didn't see anything new though that stood out.
But that's kind of neat that question was asked because we were on the floor. So maybe next year having someone who's roaming to get that.
It would be good. It'd be good for someone to pay attention to all those things. We were so busy trying to survive NAB that I know I saw very little of the floor at NAB, much less than I normally do. I was telling someone I've been to NAB. This last one was my 29th NAB.
Wow.
And there have been 2 that I wasn't working, like 2 NABs that I wasn't doing something there. And I was just wandering around and it was so amazing. Like you just wander around and look at things and talk to people. And someday maybe I'll get back to that. But there you go.
Next question.
Another QR code question from David Brady, who's currently in Chicago. Does anyone have any experience with Tools on Air line of products? Their live, play, and record products look to be feature-rich. Just curious, has anyone used them?
Alex?
We have. They're great products. They're Mac-based products, and we actually did a segment from my Pixel Core did a segment from Tools on Air in Austria years and years ago, maybe 10 years ago. So, and they're great. Pretty pricey. I mean, the stuff is really designed for broadcasters, and so I think that the entry level is in the thousands of dollars, to start to use it. But they're great. They're kind of in the same. A competitor to them would be Softron, would be one of the competitors to them. But these are what Tools on Air will do is they have automated capture systems, but they also have automated playback systems. And what you can do there is you can program with their software. You can program an entire TV station. So you can have all the segments, you can have all your ads, you can have ads dynamically added in. You can have things that are doing playback and having to hit a certain time and then be able to have it open up to live and then go back to playback and all those other bits and pieces that you need for a broadcast. And they've been around for a long time, maybe 15 years at least, and a great set of products. We should actually get them on. It'd be fun to have them on the show to talk about their products.
Next question.
Another QR code question from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Am I the only one that thinks the podcast world is trying way too hard to compete with YouTube by having way too many shows for its platform?
Jason.
Yeah, I understand how it can look that way. I think it's simpler than that. YouTube is automatically monetizable. All of the metrics are completely uniform. And podcasts are exactly the opposite. There are lots of ways to track it, and that means that there are, by definition, not one way to track it. And as such, it just gets complicated. I think podcasts are really trying to survive right now, and that's a difficult world to be in because most of us, at least on the panel, really like podcasts.
Alex?
One of the things, generally podcasts, there's been networks of podcasts. I mean, Twit is a good example of that network, but many, many networks of podcasts for almost since podcasts began. So once you start doing a podcast, you go, oh, it isn't hard. Let's do a couple of these. And they have a tendency to be able to cross-pollinate between each other. So if you build a bunch of podcasts in one area of concentration, you can kind of serve different markets in that concentration. And so I think that there actually have been it's hard to do a podcast by itself, and it's actually pretty hard to get it to be successful unless you can get some promotion somewhere else or you pay for it. So networks have been very popular for a very long time. I don't think it's anything new for podcasts to get into some kind of network.
Alexander?
Yeah, and I'm going to push back a little bit. I would argue that both YouTube and traditional audio podcasts, I think there's a ton of content and there's too much choice on both types of platforms. They're both competing with each other. And actually, if you look at it in the last few years, quite a lot of big companies have actually shut down their podcast platforms or their podcast efforts entirely. So I think we're seeing that kind of attrition happening in the traditional RSS feed driven podcast world. And we're also seeing that in YouTube. I mean, we're seeing a lot of people just on my podcast or my YouTube feed alone. I see all these videos say, goodbye, I'm leaving YouTube, right? So there's tons of that. People are getting burnt out. And I think this is just a natural cycle. The podcasts are starting to mature now. They've been around for nearly 20 years. Same with YouTube. I think if you were there at the beginning, you're probably getting tired and you're trying to figure out, how do I reinvent myself? Or how do I keep doing this every day and keep up the quality of the content and still do it with a smile on my face? I think that's really difficult.
Such great responses so far. I want to pull in the community for a moment here. So Mickey says, podcasts fill most my daily listening time when not editing or mixing. And Robert says, podcasts work really well for people with email signups. And I'm going to your point there, Alexander, of just the time span that has taken place. That yes, there are people who have been there at the beginning and the burnout that we see also with YouTube. But then there are people who are recognizing what that does as an extension. And maybe we'll get into this a little bit with our second hour on social media, but they recognize how it works with either their brand or work with their company and just building an additional way to build community. So from that vantage point, I don't know that they're really looking at that they're competing with YouTube. They're just looking for, find out where your community lives, works, and play, and you kind of want to be there. So I think that may be what we're seeing more so than is there a competition, because you're putting it on YouTube because you're like, oh, we get the eyeballs, and as Jason said, the monetization that comes with that as well. Alex?
Yeah, and podcast is going through a hard time. Spotify basically tanked the market, so they kind of ruined the entire market by themselves. So if you're wondering what happens when we try to diversify, well, if you think
Can you
Apple
expand
Music
on that a bit? Like why you say that?
So Spotify got desperate because they're a big market, but they're always worried, and you have Apple and others coming into the market. They cannot build superior sound quality because of Android, so they can't do what Apple's doing with Atmos and Vision. It's too hard for them to build spatial into it, and so they knew that Apple will compete with them at both. Apple can spend more, and Apple can build a higher quality subsystem because it's vertical, and so they needed to find other ways. I mean, they're still way ahead, but they needed to find other ways. Their recommendation engine is better than Apple's significantly, but that's something that can be fixed with software, and so how do they build a moat, as Warren Buffett would talk about? And so one of the things they thought they could do is really move in. Apple has a lot of podcasting already going on. How do we get into that? And so they started buying up a lot of networks, and basically, one of the things that they were able to do is deliver a lot more data back to folks about how people watch, how long they watched, and the problem is that the problem with podcasting is the value is actually much higher for an advertiser in podcasting, especially if it's read. If it's not an inserted ad, if it's being read it's much higher quality, but they can't get their head around the CPMs that really it should be getting a $60 CPM, $80 CPM. And a lot of times podcasts, high-end podcasts might be getting $35, $40 CPM. Middling podcasts might get 10 to 20 CPM. This is dollars per thousand. CPM is $10 per thousand, $35 per thousand, $80 per thousand. And the issue is that you're getting lower numbers, but it was always how many people downloaded it, like how many people downloaded the song and how much did they watch. Now, Spotify was able to deliver that data back to the folks, and it turned out the numbers of people watching is lower than the number that are downloading it. And what that did is it had this huge downward pressure on the pricing on advertising against those podcasts, because now you had all this hard data. And then you have these little number crunchers, that are trying to figure this out. And, this is how you ruin a market, is you have people trying to, suck every little piece of efficiency out of something, rather than there is a certain wow and flutter that makes it actually work. And and the ad agencies with the numbers and everything else took a lot of that out, and so the problem is what they see as efficiency is actually taking away the market that they were using to get to the people that they were trying to reach. And so anyway, that's efficiency sometimes can be good, but inefficiency sometimes provides the room to innovate. And so basically Spotify took that out and pressed down on it and kind of ruined the market, and so it doesn't mean that you can't get a podcast to be successful, but it is dramatically harder after they entered the market and added what they added. So it's been a bit of everyone's kind of trying to figure out which way is up.
Yeah, and to your point there, I was coming to say that the innovation part of things, that I also am looking at the quality, that we're seeing also a greater separation in the quality, unless you have a very unique topic and just audience focus. And I wanted to pull up the statistic too, that this one is specifically on Apple, but of the 460,000 podcasts on the platform, at least half of them have 3 or less episodes. So people understanding what it takes to really maintain a podcast, like not just launching it, but then maintaining it and the quality of it. That's where we're seeing that separation, and it's going to continue to happen. So those numbers of people falling off aren't always just burnout. It's also, this is a lot of work to create a quality podcast. And going quickly back to the community, Eduardo says podcasts should be supplementary, not complementary. And also continues to say stream versus download. I really enjoy how podcasts have delivered in Apple. When I look from the podcast, I can check if it's in Apple instead of Spotify. And Paul says podcast is pretty decent. Pocket Cast, my apologies, is a pretty decent platform for Windows and Mac and phones of all stripes. Be careful with Castbox. It's a Discog Overcast for Mac. Alexander?
Yeah, and on the note of Spotify too, they just announced that they have pulled out of IAB, so they are no longer part of the IAB certification. And for those that don't know, a lot of these big podcast platforms like Libsyn, Buzzsprout, they work really hard to be certified so that the stats reporting is accurate and that we're all trying to agree that this is how we report on stats, on downloads, unique numbers, all that sort of stuff. And, Spotify is one of those companies where they want more data from you. And so they're going to try to do their own thing, and they've been doing that. And so now they're out of IAB certification, and I don't know if they're going to be coming back. So that's another problem. And, on the note that you made, Liberty, about the podcast, I mean, we got like 500,000 podcasts in Apple's directory, and a huge chunk of them are just abandoned podcasts. And this stuff is, people realize pretty quickly, and the magic number seems to be 13 after a report that I looked at, where people just abandon it. And you got to treat it like a job. It's like I treat all the podcasts that I do, I treat it like a job. If I don't show up every single week, I treat it like I'm going to be fired. So that's the impetus for me to keep going. And it's really hard.
Alex?
I think that the expectation of quality has also changed a fair bit. So, we find that most podcasts, obviously content is the most important thing as far as having great conversations, but bad microphones and not, substandard editing and so on and so forth is really the end now. Like, you can't really compete. People will jump on, and you just can't get a lot of people to listen to something with bad audio because there's so much of it that's good. If you look at YouTube as another example, you could throw all kinds of stuff up and succeed 15 years ago. But over the last 10 years, it's gotten to a point where people are shooting some pretty high quality video. And, unless you have something really short or really original, you can't really compete at a lower quality anymore.
Next question.
Next question is from me. What do we think of the new monstrous Caleb Pike co-designed small rig 212 watt battery?
Yeah,
Alex?
the 212 it's a big battery. So that's all I'm going to say. It is. I mostly use 99s, and it's mostly because I can. This is the battery here. I don't know why they gave it a name other than just making it bigger. I guess they partnered with someone to do that. But here's your battery here. It's a giant battery, and I have a bunch of the 99s, as I said. And they've worked really well for me. I like the fact that I can see what's going on. I've got a lot of extra power supply. So you can see here you've got USB-Cs and USB-As as well as DTAP. And I like having those on the batteries. I use them often. So it's really good. It's a big battery. You won't be able to fly with it. So you can't fly with anything over 99 watt hours. And so so I think that's really your challenge. So I don't get over 99s for that reason, although it would have been nice, given that we drove, it would have been nice to throw a couple of those onto one of our larger rigs for NAB because we go longer, and so I could see using one of these in a future rig where we want to last a little longer without swapping batteries, technically twice as long. So, but it's an interesting, it looks good. It's big. There's lots of ones that are over 200 though. This is just a small rigs version of it.
Is this a co-brand with Caleb Pike? Is that what this is?
Yeah, I think
he's a very popular
small rig
YouTuber.
is a lot of these companies are getting into these co-brands. Okay. So Condor Blue has partnered with iJustine and with and so there's been a couple of those that have been there. Tyler Stallman has also done some stuff with Condor Blue, and so I think they're looking at getting their name out. Having an influencer talk about it is useful, but it's just a thicker battery. I think that Tyler Stallman's version of that, he really designed something with them, and I think and so it really felt like something that was his. This is just like we made a bigger battery and gave someone the name for it. I don't quite get that one completely, but it's a good connection.
Jason?
Yeah, I mean, it looks so much like just a giant 99, and the connections look almost identical. I really liked the 99. I brought one to NAB, and it ran my everything for quite a while. Definitely a bigger battery would have been useful for one of our bigger rigs, but pretty neat. The batteries that I saw at Core were pretty impressive. The magnetic, so you can basically just put the batteries on one after another, and they will just stack on top of each other. But since they're technically separate units, you can always fly with them. That was a really cool design. But yeah, the 212 looks cool.
Next question.
Next question is from Paul Wahus in Austin, Texas. Leading to Hollywood talent agency CAA has begun using CAA Vault, allowing A-list clients to create AI clones of themselves. Just what is CAA Vault, and does this have anything to do with the vaults in Fallout?
Alex.
I don't think it has anything to do with the vaults in Fallout. So the vault A-listers have been scanning themselves and having photos taken of them for the last 15 to 20 years. So basically, as scanning and photogrammetry started to come up to speed, there have been a handful of artists that, again, A-listers and some B-listers that have been scanning themselves over time so that they can resell their likeness in the future. So it's really useful if you want to have someone come back as a child or a younger version of themselves. And those have been carefully managed. That imagery has been carefully managed, obviously, because they want to make sure they can license it. They don't want to just give it away. And so that data has been out there, though, but they've been getting scans for quite some time. The idea here is that they could theoretically say, well, if you want to use, I may be acting in a film, and part of their negotiation is you can have the younger version of me, but it's going to cost X, Y, and Z to do that. And that's the resolution of the scans have gotten a lot better. We'll probably see more of this.
And I actually just wanted to jump in because thanks for bringing this to our attention, because it says, and I'll drop this link in Mukana for everyone else. So the way that they're just scanning their body, their movement, their face, their voice, and they're actually saying that they're doing this from the vantage point of protection. So yes, being able to use those assets later on, but actually protecting them. And I guess there would be some in the future, maybe some verification on where this AI generated person came from, because just like late last year, Gayle King, she had put out a video and it was related to the show, but then somebody else used that and cloned her voice and they used it for a product. So I'm wondering if there's also, based on what I'm reading here, also some security factors to it as well.
There could be. I mean, it could be one of those things that you can copyright something that you've already created, and so that, so you might be able to not be able to copyright your your likeness in the same way, but if you've created an asset, you may be able to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. I was reading that IMAX digital workflows use certain approved cameras, ARRI, Alexa, Red Ranger, Raptor, et al. Would the infrastructure for the major streaming platforms, YouTube, be able to take a 6 or 8K live stream? Jason?
I think the infrastructure, although really important, would be the easiest part of this. It's the input and the output, the upload and the download, and the sheer requirement of people's home internet to actually make this possible. That would be a much harder linchpin to overcome.
Alex?
All the infrastructure is there to do it. There's just not any good cost reason to do it. An 8K stream is 4 times as much data as a 4K stream, which is already 4 times as much data as a 1080p. And so it's just delivering that, like, what's the ROI to deliver it? We have to kind of look at it. At some point, they're giving us free content. Is there ROI to deliver 8K? And right now, there probably isn't.
In the comments, John says that 8K is pretty easy to stream compressed. Mickey says HEVC makes it a lot lighter.
Yeah. To get a high quality stream, even with HEVC, though, you're talking, you're talking 20, 30 megs at least, and that would be a highly compressed stream. So an 8K stream, typically ingest, what YouTube would like to see an ingest for is 35, for 4K is 35 megs a second. Like that's what they'd like you to see you deliver to them for a stream. And so if you multiply that by 4, you're talking about, to get the same quality out, the same quality pixels, you're talking over 100 megs a second to deliver 8K at the same level of that as 4K. And that's under a pretty recent conversation I had at NEB. So of what the target encodes would be. So what they'd like to see is in the for 1080p delivery of 10 megs a second is what they're looking for, and then it goes up from there. So it's still a lot of data, at least over 50 megs a second.
Alexander?
I don't know what bit rate they stream at, but I just wanted to point out that with certain select Marvel movies on Disney Plus, they actually do stream with Dolby Vision in 4K with the IMAX format, and they look very good. I just don't know what kind of bit rate they're actually getting out of it.
Which one? Oh, which one are we? I'm sorry, I missed that.
We're talking about some Marvel movies on Disney Plus. If you look Disney, at them, they're in IMAX format.
Disney runs at about, I believe the number is about 35. Disney's the highest, I think, bit rate. I believe it's 35 megs a second. Apple being just below Disney's at somewhere between 30 and 35 megs a second. And then the other ones are like half that. So they're, it's the Apple and Disney are competing for quality, and no one else is.
Next question.
Next question is a QR code from Angelo Jack in Brooklyn, New York. Hello, Office Hours. Great work on the NAB coverage. Does anyone on the panel have thoughts about the Alpha Cam that YOLO Live showed at NAB with time of flight focusing and using Sony sensors? Alex?
It looks interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different, time of flight is just LiDAR, so you can call it whatever you want it, but it's a LiDAR sensor or LiDAR style sensor. It's an interesting thing. I think that a lot of us have trepidations about YOLO just because a lot of the stuff hasn't worked very well. So, I think that that's been the challenge with YOLO is that they're early. Oftentimes you think you want to come out as and iterate from that rough start, but their rough start was really rough. And I think that it would take a little while for us to want to jump onto a camera and put it into production from the company. But it could be a lot better than it has been in the past.
Jason?
Yeah, time of flight is certainly not new. This is DJI Ronin's 3D focus system, and they've iterated on this a couple of times. It's neat. It works. It takes a ton to calibrate, and so much so that I found that it's just not worth the time that it takes to get it to work. I didn't actually get a chance to look at the Alpha Cam, but yeah, this is not a new technology.
Alex?
And here are the stats on it, just so you have them there. So this is a Micro Four Thirds Sony sensor. They says it has high dynamic range, NRT, SRT. It's a 4K 60 422. This is this is what worries you is when you say this is 422-bit. Makes no sense at all. It's 422 is the color sampling, and bits it should be 10-bit or 8-bit or whatever it is. So that doesn't make any sense. And that, given that you have a big design and then you don't have something that's accurate, makes us worry. So about your understanding of what is important with the thing. But it looks fun.
Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada from the QR code asks, during the NAB show, what was the brand or type of footwear? Did they hold up enough for next time on those floors?
Alex.
In the last 20 years, I've only worn two different brands of stuff at NAB, and that's Merrell's and Keen's. Keen was the one that I wore this time just because that's what I brought. But Merrell's and Keen's are the ones that we found many of us feel are the best ones for the show floor.
Jason?
I wear Doc Martens with custom orthotics, and I did a lot of walking.
How many steps? Do you all remember how many steps you got
19,000 was my record this show. Alex was all around, so I don't know. What did you do, Alex?
My record for one day was 27,000 steps.
Wow.
From the time I arrived to the time I left, I did 100,000 steps. So it was a lot of steps. My feet felt like little stumps at the end. I mean, all of us were kind of walking funny, trying to just get from one place to the other. But it was a lot of steps.
Did you all have any kind of when you got off the floor for the night, was there a routine because that's my only thing is I've done NAB New York, but NAB Vegas.
I had, for me, it was, I was going, we had dinner, I had dinners to go to. So when we finished stuff, I was generally off to, some meeting, so it was there was a get together or something that I needed to be at. So there wasn't a lot of down days on my end.
Yeah, my days started at 5:30 and ended, if I was lucky, just before midnight. There's just kind of no way around that.
Alexander?
Yeah, when I want to be comfortable, I usually wear something like Converse sneakers, but I realize that doesn't look professional. Alex, any of those brands that you mentioned, do they actually make comfortable, professional-looking shoes for work?
No, they're not professional looking. They're just look comfortable. I mean, mine look like hiking boots. I mean, because that's what they are. But the Merrells are just like, they're just slip on, they're not, they're fine. They don't look crazy, but they're not necessarily they don't look like dress shoes. The closest thing to dress shoes that I've had that I've used with thick, soles and so on and so forth are like Jason, like the Doc Martens. So I've had a lot of Doc Martens I've had so many Doc Martens. Never boots. My daughter has Doc Marten boots, but I've never had boots. I've always had shoes, of dress shoes and in between shoes and all kinds of stuff, thick soles, thin soles. But I've had Doc Martens for maybe the last over 35 years. So.
Or the Bloodstones are pretty good too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Next question is from Burkhard Friedrich in Esterberg, Germany. Any advice or recommendations for learning how to set up and do comms in production?
Alex?
We always start with things that, it's some kind of bridge or something like that. I would say that still entry level is still Unity. I think that, Unity is a fairly cost effective way to put together some comms that you can get working. So there's a Unity server, which isn't super expensive. You can start adding seats to it, and that's a pretty good one to get kind of started with. So that's where I'd probably start. And then at first you'll not understand why you would need more than a couple PLs, and then the next thing you know, you've got Unity. I feel it's a little limited from if you start in Unity, it'll be fine. If you come to Unity from ClearComm or something else, it's a little constricting, but it's a good place to start. And I think we do a lot of shows still in Unity, so it's good. And this show, by the way, the comms in this show are done in Unity. There's plenty of space on this one.
Next question.
We got another one from the QR code from Carson Jones in Cobourg, Canada. What mics are you all using right now? You all sound great.
Jason?
Well, speaking on behalf of the panel, thank you very much. But, the mic is only a little part of it. This is a Heil PR40. I don't bounce around a lot when it comes to microphones. The Heil PR40, the RE27, and RE20 are basically the only mics I've ever used on air.
Alexander?
Yeah, I've switched mics quite a bit. The one that I'm currently using, they actually don't make this anymore. This is an AKG C414B/ULS. The ULS stands for ultra linear. So this was among the very many flavors of C414s, which they still make, by the way. This one had a much more neutral, flatter frequency response, so not as crispy on the top ends. The current and the most popular one that a lot of people use is the C414 XLS, and then they also make an XL2, which is a lot brighter, which I know a lot of people, pop vocalists, hip-hop vocalists like. So the ULS, that's the one that I'm currently using. And I've also used the Stellar X2 by TechZone, which many of us on the panel use. I know Alex used to use that as well. And that's also a wonderful microphone, incredible value as well.
Alex?
Yeah, the Stellar X2 is a great microphone. In my current setup, we did some testing back and forth and decided that the much more expensive TLM 102 was the thing that we decided, that as a group we decided sounded better for the Stellar X2 in this environment. So the Stellar X2, though, is still a great mic, and in a third the cost of the TLM 102 that I'm using right now.
And I'm on a Shure MV7 and my mic of choice only because I'm constantly on the go and moving, and I can just pop the USB into whatever computer device that I have. And I would like to say it's probably also a bit of our back end team, our production team, making sure that we're all balanced. And we do go through testing in advance of coming on the air to make sure that our levels are solid. So a great question. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida asks, Google's secret camera testing lab revealed. Thoughts? And there's a CNET article there.
Oh, Google. Let's see. Alex?
Yeah, a lot of companies have a lot of different testing labs. I think that what's interesting about it when you look at some of the pictures is they have, it's a testing lab and they're testing in different environments. a lot of times, we have done tests, not necessarily for Google, but for other folks that need to test cameras and microphones and so on and so forth. And what we found more effective was to rent lots and lots of houses. And go to different things, see different environments, especially the cameras. I think you can do inside of a lab. Microphones, we found that we had to go to many, many, many different locations. We used to rent. We were in a testing cycle for some microphones that are used in a consumer device, and we rented 3 houses a week for months. And you'd have different people reading different things and different people talking about different things and from different distances, and you'd really kind of pick up the you'd have to model all of those things. But again, it's very hard to model what everybody's going to do with if you're just doing it from one place, and so your sample size isn't large enough. So that's the real challenge. But yeah, most of these companies have all kinds of testing areas, whether those are real world. I mean, like a lot of companies who have big stores and so on and so forth, a chain of stores, they'll have a test store that sits inside a campus somewhere that is exactly like one of their stores, and they can experiment with things, experiment with looks, and experiment with activations there. So, having these kinds of things in a very large company is pretty common.
Next question.
Next question's from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Should podcasts be both video and audio to survive?
Jason.
Depends on your market, but overall, I would say more is not better. And if you are nailing the audio, people will tolerate not great video. If they just want to see a talking head, there are lots of places for talking heads. So I would try to hone in on what you're doing that is uniquely yours, and then figure it out from there.
Alexander.
Yeah, Jason's advice is very good. There's nothing wrong with being on all platforms, but I would caution you with video, unless you have the willingness, the time, the extra skills, the budget to do it. It is a lot more expensive. It's a lot more difficult. I did audio podcasts for well over a decade before I even attempted video, because I just didn't want to do it unless it looked decent. And it is, thankfully these days it is a lot more cost effective than it used to be to get decent cameras, but there's all sorts of things you have to consider: set design, lighting, even just the sight lines, not having big hanging mic booms in front of your face with massive microphones blocking you. There's a lot of things involved, and it's a lot more time consuming. So how much time do you have in the week, and how much willingness do you have to show up every week and do it, and do that level of production, especially without help? If you're just one person, it is a lot of work, so just be careful.
Alex.
ROI on video is very low. I started doing my first podcast, or almost not first, but very early podcasts were all video, and they were very high-end video, and as was stated earlier, they were expensive to distribute. And we kind of moved away from it because it's just not the behavior most people have with podcasts. So most people are listening to podcasts and asking them to look at something that's long form. If you're going to do something short form, put it on YouTube. So if you're going to do something long form, then most people want to listen to it. And so I think that's the thing to kind of to keep in mind there.
And pulling in some comments from our community. Evan says, I would produce video in addition to audio if a visual aspect is necessary. But once you start with video, you have to keep it going. Mickey says, I don't watch podcasts, audio only for me. I'll just add to that of looking at it from a social media perspective of you can do audio and still have video, the component of whether that is you're putting an image over it or you're doing some sort of edit where you're helping like what is being said. If you want to go that route, if you are looking for something that's a little bit lower effort. The only other aspect of it too is in doing video is where there is, like I'm in studio today, and it's typically people will come in and they will record their podcast, and they're looking for that. You're looking for that engagement and that interaction, especially just depending on the content. So I think, as mentioned earlier, it's just a number of factors that you want to look at. And at the end of the day, it is your audience and you start looking at the numbers and tracking what performs and put your effort behind that. Next question.
From the QR code, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada asks, I want to do some outside night land photography up close, high resolution, using my iPhone 14 Pro. What are some good settings for this?
Alex?
I mean, I think it's less about good settings and more about the rig that you build. I mean, one of the things that you definitely need is a good tripod, a good solid tripod that you're going to be able to not have anything move. I do believe there's a nighttime setting. I have to admit that I haven't used it very heavily. So there are in some of the devices out there, there's a nighttime settings. In some of the cameras that are available on the iPhone. There's some nighttime settings, but the camera will do it for you. But what you really have to make sure of is that it's a nice stable environment, because it's going to want to sit there for a little while and gather as much light as it possibly can.
Jason?
Yeah, as far as I know, on the 14 Pro, at least using the native camera app, you've got 5 seconds. I don't think it'll let you capture for longer than 5 seconds. And there are apps that can make it longer than that. But yeah, when you have a sensor the size of like smaller than your pinky nail, any movement at all is going to completely ruin it.
And also Halide. Check out Halide
yes.
as a camera is the one that you probably want to look at for longer exposures and more night photography.
Next question.
From Hazmat Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. A while back, Carl taught me how to deal with blacks in an image in Keynote. This was to ensure that when using an upstream key, the key does not get crushed. Anyone remember how to adjust the image in Keynote to avoid the crushing?
Alex?
Yeah, Keynote doesn't really do key fill out. And so what you want to do is go in to do this composite that Hosmuk's talking about is, and we really, by the way, if someone's watching from Apple, we would love to have a key fill out. Or, you know, what we really want is just HTML5 with alpha channel, and then we'll figure out the key fill part of this. But what you want to do is lower your contrast a little bit. It's just a little bit. So if you have an object that you want to use there, and I don't think I have a document that I can show this quickly and easily, but you're basically going to open up your images, and in image adjustments, you can reduce the contrast by about 2%. Or 3%, and that's going to raise it up over your pure blacks, and then it will key pretty effectively. Things to note is if you use things with motion blur and so on and so forth, it may not key as well. Obviously, key fills are better, but as a quick way to throw things on top of other things, you know, Keynote is very effective and it's free.
Next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas asks, batteries on camera rigs. How often are batteries on a belt pack to reduce the weight of the rig, possibly make it easier to swap out batteries?
Alex?
You know, we don't see that much anymore. I mean, a lot of the batteries got a lot more efficient, and they're able to and a lot of times when I build the cameras, we tend to throw those onto the camera as a counterweight. You know, we've got big lenses on the front, and with the lenses, the batteries are actually useful for us because there's a lot pulling down on them. So I will admit that I haven't seen someone use a belt-based battery for at least a decade.
Next question.
Zach Stahl-Smith in Chautauqua, New York. I have some places around the building my studio is in where I want to have NDI sources viewable, but unfortunately there are no hard lines to those locations, only Wi-Fi. Any recommendations for Wi-Fi NDI devices?
Jason?
Zach, I got 3 words for you. Just don't do it.
And
Alex?
as Zach said, his plan B is NDI studio monitor on a laptop to TVS is plan B. But overall, I would not try to do anything that mattered over Wi-Fi. You know, I would not put video over Wi-Fi that mattered. I guess, yeah.
Next question.
Next question is from Jonathan Michelson in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Vimeo venues for webinars instead of Zoom. Any experience or advice? Alex?
I don't have any experience with the Vimeo tools for that. So we're a little out of our game there. So we will definitely see. We should probably try to get Vimeo on. I think they've been on a long time ago. We have some listeners there, and really have them show it to us. I don't want to give you an uneducated guess here, but I obviously Zoom has a lot of great tools in their webinar area, but Vimeo has been very focused on corporate communication, so it could be useful, but I don't think anybody here has had a lot of experience with the Vimeo tools.
Next question.
Next question's from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Do you think renting comms would be a good hardware or software business to get into for all various types of events, or just do walkie-talkie, say parties, family days, and sporting events for judges and various aux staff?
Alex?
The thing that we find about comms is that I don't usually rent them specifically, but we do provide them as a service as part of our service a lot of times. And so we'll light up we'll light up and make that part of, like, if you hire us, you're going to get comms. And a lot of times people don't even know why comms would be useful, but very quickly they're like, hey, where's the comms? Like, what do I have? They get kind of addicted to it because in events, comms is half the show, and it really is. There's all this running around that goes away, and suddenly you're talking. I remember when we moved from comms, to like really using comms for everything and what we did at PixelCore, there was all this chatter that was happening behind the scenes just went away, and we're quietly talking to each other over our headsets, and it just really made a big difference. And so I think that part of it is letting people try a show or two with the comms that you design, and then have them, and then make that a business, because once they've done it a couple times, they're not going to want to go back to whatever they were doing before. And then there's a good rental business, I think.
Yeah, and to Mickey says as well, he said, if you have a guaranteed market secured, yes. And just coming from the startup world where you create your product, or you first do some customer discovery. So if there's some people that you think that this would work really well with, or that you've gone to an event and you see a way to optimize it to help improve, people are always looking for valuable insights that's ultimately going to make them look better or make them money. So if you're able to find some people that you'll be able to do that with and just share that process, you'll do a pilot program with them potentially so that they can see the benefits of it, and then gather those testimonials, so that will then help you to go out and then get other leads and more business, and then see from there, is it make sense? Are you making money? Is it growing? Or is it something that could potentially just be a hobby or a side business? So just a couple of insights on how you could approach something like that. Next question.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas writes in, Ubiquiti Pro Max switches have ether lighting that lights up ports to locate devices. Distinguish between port speed and link and native and VLAN, etc. How do you make it do the Cylon effect?
Jason.
You don't, Paul. That's not what it's for. But it does look very cool. And Ubiquiti has had this for a number of iterations. There are lots of neat ways that they will blink and differentiate with color. There are also tiny little post screens, like little postage stamp screens on the side, that'll show you things like VLANs and connection speed and whatnot. It's very neat, and it may seem gimmicky until you find yourself in front of 100 Ethernet ports, and you're trying desperately to look between spreadsheets to figure out which end is up.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, has anyone used a monitor controller like the RTW Touch Control 5? It looks very appealing for metering during mixing, and he includes the link.
Has anyone had that experience? Because I have not looked at that at all. Alex?
Yeah, I haven't used this one specifically. There's a couple of them that are out there. We see them in a lot of smaller studios pretty often, as far as being able to see your metering, especially if you're doing, we found it to be really useful for surround. Because a lot of times you're feeding stuff in there and you want to see everything. You want to see what channels they're getting there. Now, I often will use software scopes for that. They're more flexible. But this is nice because it's all kind of compact. But again, the RTW one is not the one that we've used in the past, but it looks pretty solid.
Next question.
CJ Covell in Downingtown, Pennsylvania writes in, keynote question, is there any way to have multiple splines or curve points on a line or arrow in Keynote? Would like to have an arrow follow the path of a river and draw in.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I'll show you what I know. I didn't quite get to the river part, but if you look at what you have here, you can go up to your shapes, and in your shapes you'll see this little spline here, and you can now draw a spline the way you would normally do it here. So you have that spline there, and I'll hit escape. Now I've got this line, and I can go into my my format here and say, oh, I want to put an arrow at the end like that. I might want to make it a little bit, thicker. And then one of the ways that you can, if you go into your animate and you go into build in, you can add an effect called line draw. And so line draw is probably what you're looking for here. And this is going to do exactly, I think, what you're trying to do there. So it's basically drawing it with the arrow ahead of time, and we'll preview that again so you can see it. But it takes the arrow and moves it along that end. So, but yeah, you can draw anything you want there, and we use them a lot. One of the things that you can do here is remember that in shapes, let's say we have our logo here, and we have this, but we want it, and we can make it bigger. And I don't know why we would do this, but we will, I'll copy it here, and we'll take we can select these two shapes, and I can hit the connect, and it will build a connection between those two. And now what I can do is I can move those around, but I can also, again, give, it's basically, I can select this shape that you see here, this line here, go in here and make it thicker as needed, and then also give it an arrow. And again, that connection line can also be animated. Same thing here. So you go here, and you can see it kind of go from one side to the other. So those are a couple of different ways to animate those things. So you can use the connection lines, or you can draw your own line as needed.
Jason?
Well, it is a bonus feature, of course. Once you use that connect feature, if you are animating between slides, you can move those two logos anywhere else in the slide, and the animation will persist, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
Next question's from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Since I'm moving to a new location in my house and AT&T is unwilling to internet port in the room, should I try to get another vendor?
Alexander?
I'm not too familiar with some of the American vendors since I'm in Canada here, but if you can't get fiber directly to the house, sometimes the only choice is cable. And of course, homes are typically, most rooms will have cable on the wall. And of course, cable internet isn't symmetrical. So typically your download speeds are going to be much faster than the upload speeds. But if that's all you got, you should be able to get a pretty good internet cable package. I mean, I'm actually on a cable package right now, and I have basically a gigabit down and about 150 megabits up, which is pretty good for me. So sometimes you just got to go with what's available.
Alex?
Yeah, take a look at what the other services are. I think what they're unwilling to do is move it from one part of your house to another. They would consider that something that you need to hire an installer to do. I think from their perspective, they've already put internet into your house. I think that a lot of times most vendors will say this is where the internet has to come in, and they've already decided that that's the case. And you'll find probably some resistance from other providers as well. Once there's a hole in your house, adding the hole is really expensive. And they're not, AT&T will probably want you to have somebody else manage that. Typically what I do in my house is I have to manage it myself. So getting cable from one room to another. But I think that it'll be hard to get them to move it. A new provider might move it, but if you're going upstairs or something like that, they're not going to be interested. They're going to want to come in where it makes sense for them.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I saw a YouTube channel that used an LG consumer-grade TV, a Z2 Series 8K, as an HDR mastering monitor. Wouldn't most consumer displays be too inaccurate for mastering grading?
Alexander?
Yes, they would be. But I mean, any monitor that you're connecting to a computer, for example, on a Mac, whether it's a TV or a consumer grade PC monitor, you can color calibrate that with one of those spider checker color calibrators. So can you make it better? Absolutely. The factory settings are no good. However, I mean, there are specific monitors for specific jobs, and there's no real replacement for a true mastering grade color monitor. And they are out there, but they're quite expensive.
Alex?
Yeah, it depends on the precision that you need to grade it for. but generally, I wouldn't call it mastering. I would just call it making better. If you're not using a professional calibrated monitor.
Next question.
Next question is from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Can the panel recommend a TV stand for my 43-inch LG TV, not wanting to mount it?
Jason?
Tony, I like this one, and links in Mukana.
Awesome. We have a great week lined up for you here at Office Hours. Tomorrow is going to be Q&A for on Tuesday. So bring your questions, any question that we might have missed or you have more information that you want to share with us, bring those tomorrow. Wednesday will be our audio day, and we'll be talking about the interconnection and exploring how analog and microphones, how they're actually all working together. Thursday is another Q&A day, and we've got Q&A. So this is the week if you've got questions that you want to bring them Friday and Saturday. But the thing about Saturday is it's our special day for if you're new and you want to learn more and it's more of our testing, that's when you want to be there. All right, welcome back to our second hour here on Office Hours. If you've got any questions, go ahead and put them in Mukana, and you can always hit us up as well at askofficehours.global. We'll be covering social media and its the platforms. We'll talk about some of the more popular ones, and then how you can use it and integrate it into your workflow and your projects for personal branding as well. That's one of my favorite areas when it does come to social media. So get your questions in. Panel, go ahead and raise your hand so that we can dive into this discussion. And as much as people look at, and we should take a step back first for those who may be unfamiliar with what social media is. And it's really just the interconnection on platforms like Facebook, like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Many of them have come and go over the years, but the leading platforms, I wanted to make sure I pulled it up accurately, being the top 5: Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, with Meta in the top 3, owning three of the 5. And just, it's interesting to see though that in this, and I can share this link in the comments for our community, that LinkedIn didn't come in there, but it's super important for, I would say, for our industry as you are building your presence online and just from the network aspect of it, because that is that professional platform, and just seeing how they've all evolved over the years, where, Facebook started in a college. It was all about college students, and even like the business side of it, where they each have to grow and expand their demographic. And then also where many of them have also taken features from each other and to continue to build and explore, which is why I thought that with the conversation that we had about podcasts, that where some might be diluting, are you diluting the platform or are you making it stronger? And it really depending on your community. And even just speaking of community, when you look at, and let's take, because of our audience, even though I shared that information there, because of our audience, I figured that we could start off focusing on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Not to discount Twitter, but there's a very specific demographic that lives and plays on Twitter. And then just if I pull this out here, when you go ahead, Alex.
Have you do you have any hot takes on Airchat? Have you seen the new Airchat?
I have not. Go ahead, Alex.
It's the new, like everybody's talking about Airchat. I don't know. It's a mixture of voice and text. It's kind of, I think it's, my understanding of it is kind of trying to be a little bit of Twitter, but with voice. It'll be really interesting to see if it's possible. The idea of having something create noise all the time is not my, like mixing and matching those two genres to me is a little painful. So it'll be interesting to see whether they're successful or not.
I'm thinking that even it's interesting. So I'm going to see if I can pull that up while you're all talking. But what comes to mind immediately is like, is that kind of for that podcasting, ASMR, like where audio really being super important? And you said it was Airchat?
Yeah, Airchat is the new, it's like the new thing that somebody's, I'm sure that some investor is right now trying to stir up and see if they can't get people to download it.
Right.
Which we're all doing now, because that's what you do. You like go, oh, there's a new one. Now let's go up and take a look at it. So, but that's that's kind of the next thing, or the next one that's there. It's it'll be interesting to yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that and this is it's very much a mobile only thing. So it's you can sign in with your phone, or you can sign in with. Hold on, let me see here. I was going to try to show it here, but I thought I could show it on the computer, but it's mobile only, so that's why it's a little more complicated. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, while you pull that up, I would just level setting super quickly, as some we're probably all familiar because these platforms, many of them have well over a decade, hitting 25 plus years for the likes of Facebook and YouTube. But some of the pros and cons when you look at these platforms. So if we think about like Facebook really being where you've got they say grandmothers, but hey, they're the 40 plus audience being on Facebook. And what makes Facebook so strong is because they, of all the platforms, probably have some of the best data. So your ability to run ads and really be able to target community and audience. Then also the groups are where a lot of people will then go and build community there to be able, whether you're selling products, whether you're building just for the sake of networking, similar to the likes of the Meetup. And then of late, that's where Facebook has really doubled down on video. So them really pushing Reels, really pushing the Reels and even their stories, all which were not originally from Facebook, but from other platforms. And then if we move over to like YouTube and what YouTube does really well, we know that YouTube provides a significant amount of data. It's owned by Google, which is which is the number one search engine in the world. YouTube then being the second one. So when you look at you're putting your content on YouTube, that is really where you're looking at meeting people at where SEO is really strong, and meeting people at where they're trying to be discovered or find information. So, whether that be your long form, whether that be your short form content, or the educating, like really teaching and demo and that visual side of things, to be able, again, to test some things out and to be able to get that SEO. So this is where, the likes of YouTube is really strong. I'm going to hop over to LinkedIn for a moment. This is just really super quick so that I can get to the panel and while everyone's putting their questions in. But LinkedIn being for that, your professional audience. And professional, although many people are concerned about how LinkedIn is going now, that just being way more social than the professional aspect of things. But LinkedIn is where, for whether you're, looking for a job, whether you're looking to network, or whether you're a business who is more focused on the B2B aspect of things, and then being able to put get in front of your right audience. But one of the things that makes LinkedIn also very strong is the underlying their ability with their LinkedIn Learning, where people are now being able to upskill in various areas and learn different things. So if you are, an expert in a certain field, there are opportunities for you to then be on the platform as an educator, where people are constantly looking to you for information, or looking to just whatever that mode of expertise is, because that was an acquisition from lynda.com, which was one of the largest learning platforms before education really became a thing. So I will go over to you now, Alexander. I was like, let me just put this out there of like where's some little history and who's where and what and why.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love anyone with telestration. That always grabs my attention. That's awesome. You brought up LinkedIn, and that's something I really want to talk about, because I've historically ignored that platform. I always found it frustrating because I have gotten value out of it, but in many ways it just seems so spammy because I'm constantly being contacted by recruiters and just the general layout of the platform. So I wanted to talk to you, Liberty, and get Alex's thoughts on this and everybody else's thoughts on live streaming to LinkedIn, because I think I've been ignoring some of these platforms, and I may be missing out. And especially with the new podcast that I recently launched, I think with a potentially older demographic, we may be missing out on some people on Facebook. And I think, why shouldn't I be available everywhere? And I don't know what the current state of live streaming is to LinkedIn. I've been looking into Restream, and I know it can stream to LinkedIn, but it made me think, because, you know, with my technical background as an audio engineer and somebody that's doing video now, people do reach out to me on LinkedIn asking me technical questions. So if I come at it maybe as a personal brand thing of wanting to put myself out there as a name on, you know, who knows a little bit about this stuff, maybe I should be live streaming to LinkedIn. So how good is LinkedIn for live streaming?
So when you say how good is it, are you saying it from the quality aspect or from the tactical aspect?
Both. Let's tackle it from both angles.
For both sides of it. If you like any form of marketing or social, social media outreach, you want to make sure that you have some kind of plan or some strategy. So Cher Jones was on here now probably 2 years ago, so we'll probably need to get her back. But if we, and again, moment of telestration, so she had a show that she did, so she's on LinkedIn, and she had a VOD show that she did. But once LinkedIn opened up live, then she started doing her LinkedIn lives. And so from there, she had the recorded content that she then turned into like some snackable, SS for snackable for today. Then she had some, she created some snackable content. And then from that perspective, she's now able to be in people's feeds with those, what did she call it? Scroll stoppers. That's what she called it. It's like scroll stopping tips and comments. So from the tactical perspective, I find that just like programming, like any kind of show that you know that every Monday on office hours is like business marketing. And if that's your space, you come and you're here and you may enjoy the live so you can ask some questions. And then those who do the replay, then Alex and the team puts together some shorts. And then now you can consume the Monday show in another way. So that's being the tactical way of approaching LinkedIn that could work really well and provide value, because then you can now pull the transcript and turn that into an article, a listicle, or whatever that may be. So from a tactical perspective, that's 1 hour of your time that you've recorded, and you can repurpose all of that content. From the production side, I think I might lean into, Alex's thoughts around there. I think it's just fine of using, the likes of StreamYard. To your point, I think Cher and a number of other folks use Restream.io. I've been seeing LinkedIn live production increase, but I'm not sure if those people are like LinkedIn, partners where they get certain types of access. But I'm a big fan of live. Live helps you build community and community and engagement. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, Jason.
So at NAB, I met, I think it was Dan Swiney, and got to walk around with him. He works for LinkedIn. And what I got from him was there's just so much potential that in and for LinkedIn. And it's just starting to be something that isn't, real estate agents and recruiters. And for a long time, the loudest voices were the only people that I got on there. And then I realized that it was because I neglected LinkedIn. Right, by default, if you don't take a foothold on any platform, you'll end up just kind of getting junk. And what I'm realizing is that was because I was neglecting it. So yeah, there's a lot of potential there. I've used Restream to go directly to LinkedIn. I've never done LinkedIn Direct.
I highly would say that. Well, LinkedIn, you still need an interface. If I missed the memo on that, so going through to your point of like using a Restream, you would still need something to get through to it. Alex?
Yeah, so you can do RTMP to LinkedIn, and that's what we'll be doing is more of an RTMP direct. We've been talking to LinkedIn for quite some time. And it's been stop and start just because it's number one is most likely we'll start streaming to my account first. And I'm pretty sensitive to it. Of all the social accounts, I think I'm probably the most sensitive to I'm probably the most sensitive to LinkedIn just because it's my professional connections, and I've got like 4,000 connections there, and I'm little sensitive about that. So we're really we'll be kind of starting that slowly over May to do those, and probably just hand selecting certain days to put it on at first to see how things go. I think it's a good platform, especially to build your connection with the professional group. And I think that it's going to be really good for us because I think a lot of people are going to be interested in that. The quality is a little smaller, 720p right now, I believe. I don't think it does 1080, but it is. But for conversation, I think that's just fine. So I think that for the kind of content that's put up on LinkedIn, it makes sense. Overall, in the grander scheme of things, I think when you start thinking about these platforms, you want to think about how you engage. And one of the things that I think when we work with agencies is they think about that market in different ways. So they look at them as complementing each other, not like, how do I put the same content on everything? And so like, for instance, with LinkedIn, we may not put every show on LinkedIn because it may not make sense for that market. But we may, but for instance, like Twitter is a good one for me to just throw out, hey, we're doing this thing, or hey, we're going. That's how this whole program got started, because I threw something on Twitter going, I'm going live. 4 years ago, I said, I'm going live, and 50 people showed up. But it's a good way if you built that following. And again, my following is not particularly large or particularly small. I've got about 39,000 people, or almost 40,000 people that are listening, following. That may seem like a larger number. The amount of response is pretty low. So you don't think of you really, to get huge response, like that, something's going to really move, you need 1 million or more. Less than that, now the thing that I've done on Twitter, for instance, or X or whatever they want to call it, is I don't really pull any punches. I don't really try to build it up. I don't try to goose the numbers. I don't try to do anything else that's there. I literally just I am myself, or one version of myself on Twitter, and I don't really care whether people leave or come in. And the result of that is that when I post things, my response, if you look at the percentage of people that respond to mine, is pretty high. The percentage of people that will actually engage with that is pretty high, because I haven't, for people who have really bulked it up, and done all these little tricks like retweeting their own tweets and doing all these other things to build up more coverage, they end up with a more porous following, which tends not to have as much response. So that's the thing you want to kind of look at. The same thing that we've done here. We have a relatively small number of people watching us on YouTube, but the percentage of our subscribers that watch the show is very high. And so it's just that you look at different, you can have a very, very large number of subscribers, but does that really matter if they're not watching or they're not coming back? And so those are the things to kind of think about, when you look at those numbers. I think Twitter or X is still a valid platform. I think there's a lot of people on it. I think that the YouTube is really where we've obviously spent most of our energy, being able to put up video resources for folks. And I don't think we're necessarily utilizing it to its highest potential. But we are, I think that you're going to see us doing more. We experimented with shorts for a little while, and then we stepped back, and now we're going to keep on going again. So you'll see more shorts rolling out.
What was the step back? Was it just because
there was a couple things. One is we were like, do we like the format? Are our heads too big? Or we were kind of there was a little bit of and the reality is, so we stopped for a little while because, like, should we hand code these? Should we really hand edit these? Are our heads too big? Should we put graphics on them? And the reality is the attempt to add all the other things that might make it a little nicer basically stopped production, because we just don't have enough people involved in that area to do it effectively. And so I realized that we should just go back to cutting things up and putting them up, and making them available. What we found was that, and when I've talked to some agencies and so on and so forth about the process and what we've seen with working with other clients, is the shorts don't have to be a whole, there's just like, well, it's not a whole thought. Well, it doesn't have to be a whole thought. It's an introduction to, hey, this is the kind of conversation that's going on. And you do want it to be somewhat whole. Is it the same as the show? Absolutely not. But what you're doing is you're getting a lot of people interested. It doesn't lead to subscriptions. Like, that's the one thing, is the shorts don't lead to subscriptions. What it leads to is people knowing that the channel exists. We find that the live builds an engagement with the audience and on YouTube, so that people feel like they're connected to what you're doing. And then the VODs, if you do VODs, some kind of pre-produced VODs, that generates subscriptions. And it's something that we haven't really spent much time on at all, but something we'll be focusing on more as we go through the spring and summer, is doing things that are more dedicated VODs. The 2 or 3 that we did have been very successful, as far as generating additional subscriptions and so on and so forth. So we're gonna we'll do more of that. I think that I will admit, for me, Facebook has become a little bit of a blind spot for me, only because I dislike being in Facebook. So I think that while I know that it's a good business, I don't like it. It fills up my head, as a person who needs to get a lot done and I have to think a lot. Being in Facebook, you see things and you can't help but be kind of pulled into them. And I find that that relationship to it is a distraction from the rest of my life. And so I tend not to interact with Facebook. I check in with Facebook, and usually once a month I jump into Facebook and I apologize to everyone who I haven't responded to and said, oh, sorry, I don't go on Facebook very often. And you should probably find me over here or something like that. And so I find that to be that's kind of how I interact with Facebook. And I know that a lot of people have a much more, and I don't think it's necessarily good for our business to do it that way. I'm just saying it's a blind spot because I don't like to spend any time on it. I just feel like it's not like it's evil or anything else. It just burns up time, and I'm extremely stingy about time.
That's the point. They want
Yeah,
you
no,
to
it is,
stay
but it just burns up time, and I'm just like not willing to give it time, and I don't want it to enter my mind. Like you'll find that I'm very particular about what I'm around. Like I don't even want to hear things that I'm not, like if I'll be like, stop talking, like stop talking. Like I don't want to, because I'm afraid that I'll build a little nest in there, and then it'll be taking up time later. Whatever was said will take up time in my head, and I don't like that. So but I think that the other one, of course, is Snap. In the younger generations, most of the younger generations have kind of dumped out of Facebook.
Yes.
So like I don't know anybody under 18 that I've talked to that spends any time on Facebook. Facebook has become really a thing of the older generations, to keep track of family and friends and everything else. They're all on. I mean, when I talk to my kids, everybody's on Snap. My kids don't. It's funny. My kids aren't on Snap. They don't. They text people, and they use messages, Apple Messages, which is another popular way to get back and forth between kids. And 87% of kids have iPhones, and so they all send stuff back and forth. So they prefer that. They just think their friends are going crazy. Like my kids think that their friends are all going nuts, and so on Snap. So they tend not to do that. But I think that, looking at these, like a lot of times when we look at, and Instagram has been very successful for a lot of businesses, putting things up. Pinterest is also very successful putting things up that you do. The thing that we do when we think about events is we think about which ones are the best. So like Twitter is great to tell people things are happening. Instagram is great for behind the scenes and prepping people and pre-show and all these other things, but neither of those are particularly good for shows. YouTube is the gold standard for the quality of video that's going to go out. The quality, the scale, everything else. YouTube is going to give you the highest quality. Facebook is, another one that does high quality streams, but again, fits inside of a platform that some people are not using as much as they used to, especially if you're looking for a younger generation. So those are kind of things to consider. But a lot of times we tell clients, you may want to do your main event either on your own platform or on YouTube. Then you may want to do an after show in Facebook. Then you may want to do the pre-show stuff in Instagram and Twitter, maybe even dumping Instagram stuff during the show and tweets during the show. But the mistake people make a lot of times is they say, I'm going to live stream. And now you'll see us. I'm going to tell you this, and then we're going to do it. We're going to stream up to a lot of different platforms all at one time every morning eventually. The reason we're going to do that is mostly so that we can, as a group, we can ascertain what the performance is on the different ones, what it's like to stream to different ones, all those things. And so another thing to keep in mind is that newsletters are a big focus for LinkedIn right now. And you'll see us probably in May starting to do some kind of newsletter that tells people what we're doing every week and talks about some of the new releases and stuff like that, mostly because there's a lot of opportunity there right now.
And Alexander.
Yeah, and actually, this is a question more for Alex, but with on the social side of things with a platform like YouTube, do you have any thoughts or opinions about super chats? Because as someone who's participated, not personally used them for my show, but who has, it's kind of cool to be able to, pay somebody a couple bucks and then get your questions asked live and have your name on the show. And I think if you incorporate that well in your platform, there's an opportunity there to generate additional revenue. Do you have any experience with that?
I will admit that because I built a Q&A platform that basically for all of our clients, we just turn the chats off. And we use Makana for that. And because fundamentally, I believe all the chats that are in the systems are broken. And so they're very, very difficult to use. They're very, I don't have nice words for it. So they're just, as someone who, we spent a lot of time extracting those comments from social networks for a long time. So one of the things that we did with Commenda, which is actually going to take over the Makana brand soon, but the Commenda would go through and just strip out all the comments from Facebook or YouTube or lots of other things through their API. And it was just, most of the problem was, even if we put it into a new platform, it was all just junk. And so the thing is that, and so it was very hard to manage and process. And so I feel like part of the problem, like this obsession with low latency that a lot of the platforms have, is largely related to the fact that their comment system is broken. And so that makes it very hard for them to have conversations. And so I can't say that I'm an expert in those chat functions, because our first step, as we do with this show, is to turn it off. Just turn that stuff off. I have talked to folks that would know that the chat velocity has no effect on virility of the video, so it doesn't really matter whether you have chat on or not to make that work. And so as soon as I knew that, we were like, "Oh, we're out of here." So in YouTube, the problem is that I need to process all those questions, and much like we process them in one way here, we process those questions in other ways for other clients, but we need that back end, and the back end, YouTube has a token system that is unworkable. And so the token system is just a complete disaster. And so it's the best platform to stream on, but the comments, the way that they manage the access to the comments is so frustrating that we just gave up and stopped doing it and just told people to turn the chat off.
So, Alexander, I'd like to touch on that for a moment, because there's a show, I've mentioned them before, Hardly Initiated on YouTube. I think super chats work well from what I've observed and seen. It depends on your audience and your topic. Like for those highly engaged. So Hardly Initiated is a relationship podcast. They have grown immensely. I've been tracking them for the past year and a half, where, men, women, and they've now grown in the kind of guests that they have. So yes, there is a level of now competition to can I get in front of, LaTerrace Whitfield or, some of these authors and speakers. And they've been able to build a community around their Facebook group. 2, now that community, you have to be in the community to then now gain access to the super chats. 3, then that community being able to come on live during their programming, and now they become a part of the show. So by far, they are one of the people that I've watched and seen do it effectively and seamlessly, but they've also really built a rapport with their community as well. So topic, audience, and really building community, and they've been successful to the point now that guests want to, people that would be difficult to get, they want to be on the show because this is what everybody is talking about, and it's such a great community and space. So that I've seen. I think if just going back to what you were saying, just asking about how that works, those are just some of the things that I would look at when going into that. And it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt to test as well. I do see some comments. I want to get to them really quickly before getting to Jason, and then we'll dive into some of our community part of here. Okay, so John was sharing that low latency is required for real-time communication between the streamer and the audience, and that I like how LTT handles their pay for question. You buy merch and you can ask a question. They ignore the other platform donations. So just that aspect too. And sorry, Jason, just one more thing, because Alex, you did bring up how, because of our community and making sure, okay, so LLT was Linus Tech Tips, just for that, that comment from John there. But also, just going back to Facebook for a moment, looking at how a lot of coaches and consultants, so if that's your audience and your demo, and or that's something that you want to build out, the way I've seen a lot of people like the Amy Porterfields of the world, the Jenna Kutchers of the world, who really target women, either creatives or entrepreneurs or people who are looking at building their education platforms, that they will first use something like a YouTube and they'll stream out live to YouTube. They then now in the community aspect, and this is some of the features that aren't necessarily used very well in Facebook. However, they are valuable, is using guides to be able to navigate and help your community. Like once they come in, what do you do? What's next? And these are people who have their communities when they do their challenges or they're selling their products, easily 5,000 to 10,000 people at that. So again, just going through this, because for our community, understanding just some of the features that will be able to help you to have community there, and the importance of a community manager as well, to make sure that you are engaged and responding to people's comments. That's, someone else had said that earlier, and I'll probably bring that comment back of just like when you're on live, making sure that you're engaged with your audience. Jason?
I was reminded, Alexander, when you brought up super chats, NASA space flights, when I did the Eclipse coverage with them, not the most recent one, but the one that was earlier and before that, they made really good use of it. And it's, come to think of it, the only time I've seen it be both well integrated and I would assume for them profitable. But in order to do that correctly, you need a group of people who are going to keep it clean, stay on topic, and you know, you also just need people in the way in case somebody doesn't. You can't simply read whatever's a super chat, of course, but I have seen it done well, but only once.
All right, Alexander, let's get into these questions.
All right, first question of the second hour comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. What are your steps to optimize for LinkedIn streaming?
Alex?
We'll be able to answer that much better in the middle of the summer. So we're going to be, we're definitely, in the past, the stuff that I've worked on, partners who are using LinkedIn, a lot of it has to do with working within some constraints that LinkedIn has about when you can start events and how you start them and everything else, and being aware of those things and using Restream or StreamYard to do the streaming, because that was the only way to get in, and those would reformat things correctly. But I think that's become a lot more flexible. But we are going to start, you'll see our first stream start in May. Our goal is to stream at least once a week to LinkedIn starting by June. So if you ask that again in July, from our perspective, we'll be able to give you more information.
Andy, I'm going to go at this from just, and it's what you are probably already doing in a production phase, but just making sure that you've got, you've put out the event listing well in advance, whether that be minimum 3 days, really a week. For those of you who are on LinkedIn, you probably realize you're seeing posts from a week ago. So if I know there was an event last Friday, so I made sure the Friday before I let my network know about this AI and media, conversation that was happening, because I knew that it would take time. It's not the people who see it in the first 24 hours. It's really after. So just getting your listing, getting that in advance, then making sure that when you actually are going live, just having your that countdown clock, but not the typical way people do clocks. Office hours is a perfect example of when we go live, to make sure that the connection and everything, use that real estate for statistics or some other content that you put there in advance. And then when you're actually going live, to making sure that you're engaged in the comments, just be engaged, talk to people. After the event, go in and update all of your, the people you want to tag in it, and sharing and all of that. So that's what I would look at as optimizing your workflow, not the technical side of the LinkedIn Live, but the steps that it takes to actually make that LinkedIn Live work. Next question.
Next question is from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida. Setting aside the should you debate, any firsthand recommendations for tools to schedule and upload videos to multiple platforms, exploring options in addition to the well-known Hootsuite or Buffer?
Alexander?
Yeah, those are two applications that I have actually used for years. Hootsuite is quite capable. Same with Buffer as well. And I'm actually currently myself looking for a new tool because Hootsuite is incredibly expensive. I think their primary market is geared towards businesses who probably can afford, enterprise grade or people with big teams where they can afford, $50, $60, $70, $100 per user. But that's not me. So I'm actually looking at Buffer now because it seems like their pricing plans are quite affordable, less than $20 a month per user. And they support multiple platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and I'm sure probably other platforms as well. So I would look at Buffer if you're looking for something affordable, and they do team management as well, so you can assign things to different people as well.
Alex?
Watch the space. Most likely your options will may constrict as basically bots are frowned upon, and one of the things that people are talking about is getting rid of almost all automated ways of some of the new social networks and some of the social networks are looking at the possibility of getting rid of most of the automated solutions because they want to get rid of bots. So they want to, and so this may be, I have very rarely used any of these, and the reason for that is that I feel like it should be important enough to do it by hand to put it up, and if it's not, if I'm putting up a big schedule of those types of things. I understand the want for that, but it generally creates a more porous following than doing it by hand and doing less of it. And so that's been, but I tend to lean towards high friction acquisition systems.
So I'm going to, and I reread this. So while you said video, most of the platforms have the ability to schedule already. So, they're always going to put their platform first. So whether that be Instagram, Facebook, so using that, there are a couple of tools. So Sprout Social is one, still a little enterprise-ish with it, but they're a great platform. So many metrics and dashboards if you're doing this for the sake of doing this work for a client so that you can just send them reports. Another one that my counterparts, I'm probably going to try it in the next week or so, is Metricool. So a lot of folks are talking about that one. So I would say, so Sprout Social, Metricool. Oh, and Loomly. Loomly is another one that I found pretty valuable as well, with the team management, that being an important part of it as well. Alexander?
I just wanted to go back to Hootsuite because we're talking about APIs, and Alex mentioned things about being porous too. Obviously we've seen a lot of changes with Twitter and them pulling access to third-party clients, but because applications specifically like Hootsuite are so well entrenched in corporate and business, they still have very good relationships with a lot of these social media companies, and they still have API access. And I think there's a lot of value in having these tools because it's just too much work to have to go open up the application for every single platform you want to be on. It's very, very time consuming. So it is very useful to have these kinds of tools. And of course, some of these platforms, they do have their own tools. So you can actually look at with the Meta suite of family, there's the Meta Business Manager suite. So you can actually cross a post to a Facebook page. You can also post that same post to Instagram. They have their own tools. I don't think Twitter has their own tool for other than, I know they do have the ability, you can post and you can actually select which account you want to post to, but they don't really have a publishing tool where you can just blast out one post to multiple accounts at the same time. So I still think there's a value in this market for having one tool where you can schedule content across all platforms. But again, all these companies, they have to constantly stay up to date with these APIs because these APIs are changing. Instagram's changing features. They're pulling stuff. And then suddenly Hootsuite doesn't work properly and they have to update it. So,
next question.
Next one's from JJ McKenna in San Rafael, California. Are there social media platforms that one should avoid for the confirmation bias of membership might indicate? Alexander? I think everybody has to make their own decision about what platforms they find valuable and what platforms they feel comfortable on. I can totally understand and respect If you don't like what's going on a particular platform, and I won't mention names, but obviously people are very divided on certain social media platforms. But I just want to use one example because I use Twitter and I still get a lot of value out of it. For me, I have found the amount of work that I put into curating my feed has really paid off, and I don't see things that I don't want to see. So I take advantage of a lot of the filtering, mute lists, that kind of stuff. So I think if you put the time into tailoring your own feed on a specific platform like Twitter, you can still get really good use out of it. But again, if you don't like who's running the company, then don't use it, right? So that's totally within your right too.
Jason?
I think by definition, a platform stops being a platform if membership on that platform is itself a political statement.
Next question.
Next one is from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. Regardless of platform, how important is attentiveness?
Jason?
That depends on what you mean by attentiveness. All platforms are competing for your attention. That is the currency. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. You mean attentiveness to the post? Then yeah, it's certainly important. But yeah, don't spread yourself too thin.
Alex?
I definitely think about it when I post. It's why I don't post as often as many other people, is that I feel like I should look at almost everything that I'm doing and be as attentive as possible in those processes. So when you're dealing with your posts, just posting it and then walking away is not a great experience for everybody. I mean, it's not that you can't do it every once in a while, but you have to be able to. I view it as a conversation, that you're having with the folks that are part of your community, and so I think that it is it's pretty important to have people feel like they can connect with you. And again, this is when you're trying to build a more dense following of folks, knowing that they can actually have some access to you. Through that process, I think is important. And so I think attentiveness is hard. I think that most people try to build they want to build community and they want it to be easier than the real world. But the reality is if you're going to build real connections with people, you need to treat it a lot like the real world, and so if you just say things and walk away from people, that's the way I think of it. Is like if you walk into a crowd and yell something and then walk out, there's a certain level of relationship that you build there with that. But if you actually get in there and have a conversation and post things, I mean, the other thing that so I think that when people think that, I can just build a community around my product and that the community is going to take care of itself. That's what it's sold as. Rarely works that way.
And Vic has updated in Mukana, and he said he's referring to engagement. I would say that platforms, one, across the board, it's important, but specifically YouTube is definitely one where responding to people's comments is important. And then hand in hand is LinkedIn. And I'm going to put this challenge out to our viewers, but then also to our community. If you are on LinkedIn, just for like a week or two, just test, not even really posting, but responding with quality responses to people's comments. And I guarantee that you will either get some eyeballs on your profile or continued engagement. That's where, and I'll try to find some of the people who, their recommendations. Like there's so much more value in the responding to people's comments, because when you're on this post and then in the comments there, someone has commented. Well, if you then go and respond there, what LinkedIn does is it notifies your entire community that you've responded. So if you just respond to comments and are engaged, that keeps you in the loop of just being visually connected. Next question.
Next one's from Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. What is the best bet in Twitter alternative horse race? Bluesky, Discord, Mastodon, Threads.
Alex.
Threads has picked up a lot of users, active users. I haven't seen it make any impact. I hear a lot of people are on Threads, but I don't see anything actually happening with Threads. So it's kind of a weird, and a lot of it has to do with the way Facebook has kind of forced it into the structure. So I don't know if that is. I don't know if it really matters. I think that, and Mastodon and Bluesky, I mean, they're cute, but I don't know anybody that uses. I mean, There's a lot of geeks in the blogosphere or whatever you want to call it that are talking about Mastodon and Bluesky, but again, nobody's using it that I have a Mastodon, whatever, but there's no real action there. I think Discord has been probably the biggest. Most people have looked at Discord as the solution for building. It's much harder than just having something that you can post to. So, and we have a Discord that isn't particularly large, but it isn't particularly small. We've got a couple thousand people in it, and that is so that has been the one that's there. But again, I think the problem that Threads has is that it's connected to the advantage that it has. It's connected to Facebook or Meta, and the disadvantage it has. It's connected to Facebook or Meta. So it just. But I think that right now it's gotten a lot of big numbers. I just haven't seen it make any impact yet.
In the comments, John says that his money is on Threads. Eduardo says, I don't know about Threads. I'm not feeling it. So we'll see. I've been a week or two ago when Instagram had some updates. There were a lot of influencers. There was this call that went out to a number of influencers on Threads. So we'll see. We'll see what happens over the summer. Next question.
Annie Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida asks, how would you support the screen formats for YouTube and TikTok at the same time?
Alex.
We think about that a lot. I mean, TikTok does now have a rotating 16 by 9, but it is much more comfortable to watch at 16 by 9, 9 by 16. And even for us, the centering, and you may even see our heads get a little bit smaller as we start to kind of frame that. It's mostly for YouTube Shorts and less for TikTok, but having those formats, I think thinking about what those formats might be is important. For other clients that I've worked with that had to post to both of these, we shot at 4K or higher, sometimes 6K and 8K, so that we could just pan and scan the vertical inside of the 16 by 9. So we knew where the 16 by 9 was. Oftentimes we marked it off as inside of our viewers so that we understood what we were doing. And then we were able to deliver a 16 by 9 that was appropriate, and then also deliver a solid 9 by 16. So, it just depends on what you're doing there. A lot of creators do this crazy thing with their phones. They've got these little. I got some. I haven't used them yet, but this is what they all have are these little suction cups, and so they have these little suction cups that they put on both of their phones, and then they put the phones at together sideways, so the phones are stuck together, and they're shooting both 16 by 9 and 9 by 16 at the same time with the phones. And I haven't quite figured that out yet. It's been one of those things. Like if I go to a social media thing, I see them everywhere, and I haven't built it, but I did get the pack to try to figure it out. I built one with metal, where the phones are all, like they're all done in, with real holders and rigging, which feels very heavy compared to these little stickers. So,
next question.
Robert Green in Los Angeles asks, are private groups the way to go in social media, i.e. Telegram, Discord?
Jason.
They're certainly a way to go if you have some way to feed into it. Our Discord is excellent only because the people who are willing to go through the approval process are motivated to do so.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've looked at is a fairly low friction way to see our content, which is YouTube and in some cases Twitter. And then, looking at creating a slightly higher friction to get into Discord, because Discord, you actually have to be around people. So in the past, we have not been super aggressive. In fact, when we first started our Discord, we made it very hard to get in. You had to be at a very certain minute in the morning. You had to be available, and people would reach out to me going, "Hey, is there any way I can get around that? I don't want to get up at 6:40 in the morning." I'm like, no, there's not. Like that's the price. And so so I think that we made it a little easier. As we grow, we may make it tighter again. Harder to get it back into Discord because we want that community to keep on thriving, and you don't want everybody who's watching to be in your more private community. So you generally want to have it be a little higher friction, at least, than the standard viewership.
Alexander?
I've gotten a lot of value over the years from social media in general. I've made friends with people, but I've never looked at social media as a community. I've found that it's like you can have a following and you can engage with people and have good feedback on if you're doing podcasts. People say to you stuff all the time. But for me, it's not a community, and Discord for me has been far more successful in a lot of the communities that I've participated in Discord, office hours included, it's been a lot more valuable to me. So I think Discord is the way to go to build a community. I'm starting to build one out for my new podcast, and it's great being able to chat with people. So to me, social media it's more of maybe this is a bit harsh, but it seems like a bit of a dumpster fire. It's not a good way of making really close personal connections with people.
Next question.
Next one's from Eduardo Augustine in Panama. How do we get started on LinkedIn streaming? Also notice there is a lack of clarity on how to consume that content, audio streaming versus video streaming.
Alex?
I do think it's really geared towards video streaming. So I think you want to have a video component to it. So you want to think about what that's going to look like, but also make sure you have high quality audio and assume that people are going to be listening to it that way. There is a way that you can start streaming to a dummy account, or not a dummy account, but to test. You can do test streams that are there. And again, we'll dig into this much deeper over the summer as we start to do streaming, because we'll be doing it regularly in the not too distant future.
I was trying to see if I could pull up, because I think if your question, Eduardo, is also from a technical perspective, I believe you need to switch on. Let me see. I'm going to try to do this back-end team. I think I should be able to share screen, right? Where am I? Here we go. And okay, so can you all see? You can all see my screen? So you should, right here, you've got to make sure that your creator mode is turned on, because then that's going to give you access to all of those features, so that you'll then be able to stream and to be able to do the audio aspects of well. So just make sure that you have creator mode, and you just have to do that by going to your name and then scrolling down and then creator mode, and then that gives you the ability to be able to stream. Next question.
Next question is from Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. Is the previous guidance of creating platform-specific content for each platform that it informs followers but also steers towards the home platform still the best way to go versus replicating content on each platform?
And forgive me, because now I can't turn my screen share off. If they could go to the person who asked the question.
Yeah, I would say that you do want to have different content in different areas, and of course you want to go out to your different audiences, but you do want to try to find a place if you're going to have conversations of where you want to do those. And right now we have found that Discord still is one of the best places to do that, of building a community that is more you can use to go to lots of different formats, lots of different, and that's your core community. It's not everyone that's watching, it's not everyone that's connected, but it's people who really care about that specific thing. And so that's so a lot of us have used Discord to pull people back in, and we looked at a lot of different platforms at the time and landed on Discord, and we've been pretty happy with that. It is, for some audiences, it's very complex. Like, it's not a general. I would say that we are tech driven, and so Discord makes sense. I think that for a lot of general audiences, Discord may be too heavy. Also Facebook groups have been out there, but Facebook keeps on tightening the way groups work, taking a lot of the fun out of it. So a lot of groups have been trying to figure out what to do next. And so that's been part of the problem as well.
Next question.
Next question is from me. Has anyone have any experience with Restream? I only stream to YouTube right now, and I've been testing higher bandwidth 20 megabits per second data streams. Restream conforms data to be compatible with different platforms. Any way to specify higher bit rate in Restream?
Alex?
No, the advantage really is that by doing that, they're making sure that you're delivering the right format. You're not doing something that would cause trouble. So they're conforming where your keyframes are. They're conforming your resolution and bandwidth. But yes, they are, for a variety of reasons, limiting what your bandwidth can do. I don't think there's any way to change that with Restream. I think Restream is a great product to make sure that you're going to platforms in the way that they expect it, to be able to send it to multiple platforms at the same time. But you are doing something that's a little cookie cutter. And so if you really want something that's going to look the best it can, you're not going to use that platform.
Jason?
Yeah, exactly what Alex said. I've played around even in real time with raising my bit rate, going up and increasing the quality as I'm streaming to Restream. And their goal, I think, really has to do with latency. Some of their additions of late have been an attempt at, bringing people in and being able to do the switching part of a live show. All of that requires an extremely steadfast quality level that isn't as high as it could be.
Next question.
Next question is from Gabriela Echesso Mistiera in Sault Ste. Marie. Social Media Podcast Expo is hosting on the line its freemium Masterclass Virtual Summit on AI and creator tools today and this week. Who's going? What can we expect to learn? And what are you so excited about in this thing? Thanks.
Alex?
I have to admit that I forgot that it existed. so it was, when it got posted here, I was like, oh, it used to be happening at the same time as NAB. I don't even know where it is now. Because they're very, unless it's all, it's a virtual. Oh, no. I guess it's just a master class that's all virtual that's there. So I don't think there's a place for it. There was a podcast summit that used to happen during NAB. They had their own version of it. I think I met a lot of creators in the past there, but but I think that when they separated from that, they kind of disappeared for a lot of us. And so they have a variety of. Let's see. We'll show you the schedule here. I was just trying to find some of the stuff there. Let's see. So here's they've got. I'm assuming that this is because there's no address. I'm going to assume it's happening right now, today through Wednesday, and they're talking about lots of different. They've got a lot of great speakers.
The automation stuff looks good, but we've been on live, so we missed that part.
Yeah, exactly. We were unautomating the automation. We'd have to look at it a little bit closer. Again, I don't know if this is the same platform that was the old podcast summit that we used to do in Orange County. It's interesting. It was not on my radar, so we'll have to take a look at it a little closer.
Next question.
Next question is from Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas. Will Airchat become the next big social network? Waiting for an invite from an office hours friend.
Yeah, who's got all the invites, Alex?
I didn't need an invite. You might want to check again. I went right up and signed. I just downloaded for Airchat. Interesting. Yeah, I jumped into Airchat unless I need something that I don't know. I went in, downloaded it, signed up. Didn't need to do anything. I'm in it, so I don't know what to do with it now. But I have it downloaded, and so maybe it was something you might have had to wait for recently. It'll be interesting. The moment the exact thing I was concerned about is the moment I turned it on when we were on the show. You might have heard like a little bark. It just started talking immediately, which I did not approve. That I did not enjoy. So anyway, I think that so I have it downloaded. I mean, my typical thing to do is I get on every social platform that pops up to make sure that I have my name. I'm on it mostly to stake. If it turns into anything, I just want my name to be there, and so I have that now. So that's I get that, and then I move on. And if it starts to pick up speed, I might jump in. I'll probably post some stuff there. We may try to think about how we could do something with office hours there. We did this with Clubhouse. And what we found very quickly with Clubhouse was that it would be great if we had, like Mukana made it really fun to use, but by the vanilla version of it was not usable, which I guess people figured out over time, and so it's the logistics of it made it hard.
I'm trying to do this and become a part of. So I didn't need an invite so far. I'm going through it while on. So I just downloaded. Yeah,
it might have just opened up. It might be that they're pushing all the PR right now because they're now past their invite-only beta.
Oh, okay.
So that might be why we're getting all the PR right now is like trying to get the people out there so they know. Because the hardest part with the social media is getting that first group of people so it doesn't feel like an echo chamber. And I think they're trying to, you can't really start a social media platform anymore slowly. You need to get past the echo chamber version of it as fast as possible. And I think that's what they're attempting to do right now.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Twitch's simulcasting guidelines don't allow presenting content like merged chat from other platforms to Twitch viewers. How do you guard against balkanizing your audience when streaming to more than one platform simultaneously?
Go ahead, Alex.
Again, I have to admit, I use Makana for that, so that we just put the QR code that you see come up on our show. We'll put it up against multiple platforms or multiple things, and we pull everybody together. So we just ignore all their chat functions, and we found that to be a lot easier than trying to figure out how to. StreamYard will let you pull all of those things in to do it, but I find that to be more difficult. I want them to all feel like they're in the same community.
And Jason.
Yeah, Restream will also allow you to add them together. I think if you were to ignore all of the social streams out, so if you ignore Twitch and YouTube and et cetera, by definition, and are simply using your own input, then that's how.
All right. Well, we've wrapped another great day. Thank you so much to our producers for all of those fantastic questions digging into social media. And of course, to our panel for your insights and your expertise. And our back-end team for without which this would not be possible. And just looking at the Taluk Traversal, we have gone 77,000 miles. That's 124,000 kilometers, 609 million bananas for scales. That's a lot of bananas. For the rest of the week, the schedule for the rest of the week, head over to officehours.global. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
It's a great studio, Liberty.
Yeah, very nice.
Thanks. Yes. We've got some stuff coming up. So I was like, I have to be in here today.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I couldn't figure it out that you have a white USB cable. It took me a while to figure out what it was. I was like, why does she have a line on her arm? Like it looked like this white line on your arm. And I was like, what is going on there?
Right.
I kept on looking at it going, that's a crazy tattoo to put on there, or some kind of like a new fashion statement. And then I was like, oh no, it's a USB cable.
Right. Because for some reason the other one was, I was not risking it. This is my first day back in a little while. I was not risking it shorting out on me.
No, totally.
I think RGB LED on that plant, so you can just change the color of it.
Yeah, there you go.
Jason, thank you.
There you go.
All right. See you. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, backend. Awesome.